Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. We hope that you enjoy today's sermon by our pastoral staff at Christpoint Church. We also want you to know that if you have any questions, prayer requests, or need information on any of our ministry opportunities, you can email us at info@christpoint.church. We love you and we are praying that this will be the best year yet. Welcome home.
We cannot allow our environment to dictate our level of faith. And I'm going to look at that as we go along. But here's the thing. It's easy to have faith when somebody else is going through it. It's always easy to have faith when it's somebody else that's having a difficult time. But it's always difficult. It always gets harder when my faith has to be on the line. Key point number 2. Music was the call to worship. Music was the call to worship. We use music as a call to worship. The American church uses music as a call to worship. King David used music as a call to worship. Music is a call to worship. Verse 5, when you hear the music, and I'm not talking about a Doobie Brothers song. I'm talking about, I'm not listening to the music. When you hear the music that's being played, in other words, he's saying when you hear the music and when it's being played, you gotta face the image, fall on the ground, and worship the image. You got to put yourself at a worship level before something you never asked to be built. So, number one, this is a mockery to God. This is a mockery to God because music was a call to worship. God never intended for music to be a call to worship idols. He never meant for music to be a call to worship idols, but this is what the king has set up. So the people went along with it. God gave us music as a call to worship Jesus, as a call to worship the true living God. That's why we use music. It's a call to worship Him. So, key point number 3. Verse 7, we noticed it, we read it just a few minutes ago too. But verse 7, all peoples, all nations, and all languages. Here's our teaching for key point number 3. The enemy is constantly trying to change the language of the next generation. The enemy is always trying to change the language of the next generation. Do you remember last week that we said, we kind of noticed how much this generation, where we are now, has gravitated just in our vocabulary. Our vernacular has changed from 100 years ago. We don't speak like we did 100 years ago. We don't think, we don't talk. We don't have social media platforms to live a life of comparison. And, they didn't have that back then. We do. So, we got here because we slowly accepted evil as good. They got here in Babylon because they slowly accepted evil as good. And here's our second teaching in key point number 3. Nothing threatens our devotion like the promise of death. Now, man, I'm all in. I'm all in. Let me just give it to you in our language. I'm all in with the Lord. I'm all in with the Lord. Until your reputation is threatened to be killed. Then maybe I'm going to back up a hair. I'm all in with the Lord. I'm going to serve the Lord with everything that I have until maybe, and we had this happen in our lives, a man kept telling us in the 90s, if I answer the call to ministry, my wife will leave me. And he didn't, and he didn't, and he didn't. And one day, he just was before the Lord, and he said, I've got to answer the call to ministry. He went home, and she left him. In other words, when your marriage is going to die because she don't want to, or he doesn't want to go where you want to go, then all of a sudden, we may just back our level of faith down a little bit. To say, I've seen it, and we've watched it. I've watched people leave this sanctuary because the spouse didn't want to serve the Lord. I've watched it. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. All I know is the song says, either way, I won't bow to the things of this world. So, nothing threatens our devotion like the promise of death. If we feel like a relationship is going to die, we probably are going to have to really look because society, do you realize that 43% of the millennial population, and some of you fit into that category, 43% of the millennial population either believes there is no God, doesn't believe in God, or doesn't care that there's a God. That's almost half of the next generation. And I'm sorry, if you're a millennial, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it like it is. And I can't talk to you because you know everything. So I'm sorry if it fits the bill. So I didn't clap, though. All I did was say it. So nothing threatens our devotion like the promise of death. If I feel like I'm going to lose, or I feel like this is going to be killed out of my life, if my reputation is going to take a hit, all this stuff, I think, sometimes we'll just back up. Key point number 4. Traps will always be set for God's people. They'll always be set. 1998, I was over in Sweetwater, Tennessee, and there's a dude had a panel van. I talked about it. My friend wrote a song about it. And there's a dude at a panel van. And it looked so cool because it was kind of professional, but kind of not. And I'm just thinking, this dude, is he the real deal? So I just walked over. I said, I'm going to check this little guy out. I said, hey, can I take a picture of your van, your panel van? Yeah. And he just starts talking. I'm right here. He starts talking right here. And he says, the Lord wants to know that you're a man of great faith. And I'm thinking, who in the world is he talking to? And I look around, and because he had somebody with him. And I thought the guy went around. I thought he was getting ready to get mugged or something. He said, and he looked at my feet. He says, you've had traps set for you. And you've been caught in the traps. But you haven't been hurt by them. And God's going to use you. And then he gave me some more things that the Lord said. And every one of those things came true. Every one of them. And he even told me some of the things that were set. So traps will always be set. And I mean, these are the things that you're like 6 months later. Oh, the dude with the van. Oh my gosh, all of that came true. So traps will always be set for God's people. Verse 8. Certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. So certain Chaldeans. So number one, Nebuchadnezzar was a Chaldean. They had basically taken Babylon. So Babylon was kind of already lost to the Chaldeans probably a generation earlier. So the Chaldeans had already taken over Babylon, so they just kept the name. And so the Chaldeans had threatened or basically maliciously accused. In other words, they're going to set traps for the Jews. So the enemy will always, here's the thing, the enemy will always fit into every system. The enemy is going to fit himself into systems that make sense, that work. The enemy is going to fit himself into the system. The enemy is going to make sure he speaks the language. The enemy is going to make sure he looks the part. The enemy sometimes may even look really, really good. Really good. So cancel culture today wants to eliminate everybody's individuality. So the enemy will always fit into systems and try to eliminate individuality. In other words, speak like us, talk like us, act like us. So key point number 5. Your identity will be established in something. Your identity is going to be established in something. I promise you. I promise you. Whatever's in there, that's going to be your identity. Verse 18 will show you what I'm talking about. This is where Rack, Shack, and Beanie come in. Man, these dudes, man, I'm telling you, it's easy to read it, and it's easy to these are my guys, but it's not so hard when it's you. Let it be known to you, O king. Now they're facing death. Let it be known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, or we're not going to worship that thing. We're not going to serve your gods. We're not going to worship that thing that you set up. You notice that last 4 words, that you set up. Okay, 4 words. Okay, the dyslexia kicking in. So, let it be known. I mean, you don't tell the king of Babylon, who thinks himself as a god, you don't tell him that you're not a god, and we're not going to worship you, and we're not going to recognize your gods, and we're not going to worship that stupid-looking thing you got stinking up there. We're not going to. That you set up. So notice something. Here's our teaching in key point number 5. If you have to set up your God, then you are your God. If you have to set up your God, then you are your God. I'm sorry, you're the one that set it up. So you are your God. So, Rack, Shack, and Benny, they established their identity in God. They didn't allow the environment to dictate their level of faith. They had literally established their identity in God. They didn't reevaluate their identity when the fire was heated up. So Nebuchadnezzar gets mad. He gets furious. He's like spitting nails and breathing fire. And he tells them to heat. This is what I have commanded, and you just rudely object right in front of everybody. Do you realize if I let you go, everybody's, I kind of take it that he has a relationship with these guys because he's named them. Their names are not originally this. These are Chaldean names. And so he's named them, and he's talking to them, and he gets super, super mad, and he tells them to heat this furnace, this fire pit, 7 times hotter. But as the heat began to rise and even kill people that got near it, these guys, I'm not giving up. I'm not giving it. I'm not reevaluating my identity and who my identity is in just because I can feel the heat from the fire. So we've got to remember that our situation cannot dictate our identity or our level of faith. Our current situation cannot set that standard for us. So, key point number 6. The hotter the fire, the fewer the people's going to go. The hotter the fire, the more alone you is. So, it's true. So chapter 3 doesn't tell us how many stood against the idol worship. Verse 8 says that they accused the Jews. Doesn't say how many, but what we do know is 3 guys stood firm. 3 guys stood firm. They stood in their faith. They stood in their identity. They built their identity in Christ or in God at the time. They had built and designed and built their identity and their devotion to God. And these guys were willing to die. Verse 17 and 18. They were willing to die. See, here's the thing. We're not going to bow to worship that thing. We're not going to bow and worship your gods. Just because we're in your land doesn't mean that our God is still not God. See, in their minds, your gods were left back there. You don't have a God anymore. See, the Chaldeans, they still don't understand God. So verse 17, 18, God is able to deliver us. God is able to deliver us, but if He doesn't deliver us, then you know what? You can't hurt us. Philippians 1:21, and we don't have it. I'm just going to kind of give it to you. For me to live is Christ, and for me to die is gain. So you can't win either way. I win either way. Paul says I win either way. So, I may be thrust into a system I didn't ask for, but one thing is for sure, I will resolve to worship Christ where I am. Where I am. These guys resolved to worship the Lord where they were. It's like, look, I can't turn on my God just because that fire's been heated up. I can't do it. So, key point number 7. The world thinks in the natural. So verse 15. Go to the bottom of that scripture. We're going to kind of go at the bottom of it. And who is the God? This is Nebuchadnezzar speaking. And they're like, we're going to worship God. So again, the world thinks in the natural. He's not thinking supernatural God. He's not thinking all-knowing, omnipotent, omniscient. He's not thinking that of the omnipresence of God. He's thinking, he's not thinking God in spirit. He's thinking that it's an image that you build. He said, and who is the God who will deliver you out of my hand? See, you're not looking at things, Rack, Shack, and Benny. You're not looking rationally at this. I'm still trying to save you. Bow down to the thing and let's go on. But you're refusing to do that. And who's going to be the God that's going to save you from my hands? You know what? There again, I'm going to crawl up in your lap, Lord. I'm going to let you fight my battles because I'm pretty much not that good at doing that. I think I am, but I'm not. So, when we esteem ourselves as righteous, when we esteem ourselves as powerful, when we esteem ourselves as naturally divine, I think I made that word up. I kind of like it. When we esteem ourselves as naturally divine, which I kind of interpret that to be when we're naturally divine, we're above everything in the natural. See, when we esteem ourselves in this fashion, then we are blinded and we can't see the supernatural. See, all we can focus on is the natural, and we can't see the supernatural hand of God moving. And we can't trust Him in faith because our minds are distorting, our natural minds are distorting the supernatural outcome. So, the king was speaking from natural thoughts to supernatural mentalities. Let me show you what that looks like. Well, I'm going to tell you something. I'm believing that the Lord's going to heal my mother. I'm believing the Lord's going to heal my mother. Well, I don't know about all that. Now, I don't know. The doctor said that she didn't have much of a chance. What the world is doing is speaking, the world is literally speaking natural thoughts into supernatural mentalities. Because those who walk with the Lord, must walk in a supernatural mentality, or we are not going to be different from the world. So I'm telling you, this is what I feel from the Lord. And I'm going to tell you something. Tina and I were at our network meetup in February. And I went out last night. I was brushing my teeth, getting ready to pray. And it just hits me. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I go outside and I call Matt. And I'm like, and we do this Voxer thing. So I Voxered Matt, and I'm like, dude, seriously, you got to remember this. I was, we're in this, auditorium's about 100, it's about 86, something like this. A bunch of them can't come right now. So we're about 85, 86, something like that. Pastors is just, and wives and ministry teams. And he just, like he's saying, I just feel that we can't move on right now because I feel like there's somebody seeking healing. And people were, being prayed for. Then people would testify afterwards. And I'm like, I can't sit here any longer. Give me that microphone. So I stood up and I said, what if? What if my mother's healing depends on my testimony and my speaking in a level of faith right now? I don't want to walk out of here and my mother not be healed because I didn't speak from faith on this February 4th or whatever day it was. And so I just hit me. I go back out last night in the driveway, and I'm like, dude, I don't know if you remember that. You remember I took and my mama's healed, y'all. My mama's healed. There is no more nothing in there. So I'm telling you, you can't take the natural. Let me illustrate. You can't take natural thoughts and you can't speak natural thoughts into supernatural mentalities because I'm not going to hear that it can't be done. I don't want to hear that, and I'm not going to listen to that. So key point number 8. Key point number 8. Foundation is everything in building. It's everything. King Nebuchadnezzar built an image of himself. It was 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. It's a 10-to-1 scale, tall, skinny. For it to have stability, can you imagine the foundational structure that had to go deep into the earth in today's standards to hold that thing? In other words, the Washington Monument goes deep into the earth, or it still wouldn't be standing to this day. It would have had to go deep into the earth. It would have had to be in reinforced concrete, storms, wind, longevity. It could not have lasted otherwise. Its foundation would have had to have been deep into the earth, and they didn't have that kind of thing back then. And it was made of gold on top of that. Probably not pure gold, probably wood overlaid with gold, still very, very heavy. Images will always shine in the sun. Images will always draw attention. Images will always tower above everything else, but they will always lack foundation. They will always lack, and foundation is everything. They will always lack foundation. And foundation is everything. If you, Tina and I, flipped a lot of houses, remodeled a lot of houses. And I remember I called on one. I said, tell me about this house. I'm interested in it. You don't want that house. I'm like, why? Well, foundation's got to be redone. So, you can rebuild a roof. You can rebuild, you can rewire, you can replumb, you can put new walls, take walls out. But if you have a foundation that is threatened, you pretty much are in trouble. Several years back, I think in the 90s, a tornado went through kind of Squatchy Valley there around Cagle. And I remember driving by there, and I noticed the house looked funny. The house had been just moved about maybe 2 or 3 feet off, just turned from its foundation. They couldn't save that house. You can't just return the house. So they had to literally demolish that house because its foundation was destroyed. Foundation is everything. If the foundation is compromised, it will have to be torn down. So, key point number 9. You're never alone in your fire. You're never going to be alone in your fire. Verses 24 and 25. And before I read those, I want to tell you about the fire real quick. What they would do is they would dig out this big pit. We kind of, in this we have this image of this fiery furnace with a little door. And they could open it up. We watched so many movies. It was probably lined or in solid stone. It probably had a ramp down in it so they could clean it up. And they would put wood. And they had certain wood, like we have hickory. They had certain wood that would burn hotter, and they saved that. So they would build this thing and when you're thrown in there, you're going to probably be about 2 or 3 minutes. You're going to burn up. You're going to feel all of it before you actually die. And so they didn't come out, but they would have to go down in and clean. So they throw Rack, Shack, and Benny in there, bind them, put ropes on them. So here's the thing. I love it. King Neb, he's looking there, and he's like, you see the fire, you see the heat, and you can't even look. Guys were burnt, and their lives were forfeited just putting the guys in there. And King Neb is like, what? Did we put 3 guys in there? Did we not throw 3 guys in that fire? Yeah, we threw. Well, I'm telling you, did we not throw 3 guys in the fire? And they're like, yes, we threw. Go get. Oh, yes, great King. Pick number 3, Lord. Did we throw 3 in there? We threw 3 in there. We threw them in there. Well, wait a minute. I see 4 guys in there. Now, how'd we get 4 guys? When only 3 went in, how'd we get 4 guys? And wait a minute. Do you see what I see? Well, I see a big flame. I see 4 guys, and I don't only see them, I see them walking around. And not only do I see them walking around, that 4th one looks like the Son of God. Yeah. Now, when you sing the song, He's going to walk with us in the fire. We're not alone in the fire. There's another in the fire. Even the great King looked in there and says, that's the Son of God walking around in there. I know who's in there now. There's a 4th man in the fire, and he looks like the Son of God. You're not alone in your fire, people. You're not alone in your fire. Whatever your attack is, Jesus is already in the fire before you get there. You're not in this fire by yourself. See, I'm reminding myself, Tina and I are reminding ourselves right now, this past week and a half in our lives, that we're not in this fire by ourselves. This issue that's going on in our lives, we're not in this fire by ourselves. Because I already know my God's in my fire with me. I already know it. Jesus is in the fire. It may be a little hotter than it usually is. It may be a little bit more detrimental, and it may look terrible, and there may be all kinds of flames, and you can't even get near it. But you know what? You look hard enough, you'll see Jesus walking around in there. Key point number 10. You won't come out of your fire the same way you went in. You're not going to come out of your fire the same way you went in. Verse 27. Their hair was not singed. They didn't have singed hair. Their clothes were not damaged. And as my son would say, they didn't have a smoke smell on them when he was a kid. So in other words, it's kind of like this. You want to burn a fire tonight? No, it's Saturday night. Well, why don't you want to burn a fire? Let's set out and we'll burn. No, I get smoke smell in my hair. I have to wash it for church in the morning. So I'm saying you can smell it. So they didn't smell like this. Their clothes weren't burned. Their hair was not singed. There was not a speck on them. And I love verse 25. And he says, I can see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire. In other words, we threw them in like this, didn't we? We threw them in like this, didn't we? Yes, we did. But you know what? I don't see any of that anymore. I don't see any of that anymore. All I see is 4 men. We threw 3 in. I see one who looks like the Son of God, and they all walking around. Not just one of them, they're all walking around. So, your situation wants to enslave you. And it will enslave your mind if you give it a chance. What takes you inbound, God will lead you out free. because that was the only thing that came off of them was the thing that bound them. So what the enemy meant for evil, God turned it for good. So what takes you in bound up, God will lead you out freed up. This is how we survive Babylon. This is how we survive Babylon. We can't give in. We can't change our identity, change our minds when it doesn't fit the narrative. We can't alter our language. We can't all of a sudden start speaking a different language. You know what the Christian speaks? The Christian speaks praise the Lord language. You know, I don't speak Christianese. I don't walk through Walmart and say, God, well, bless God, glory to God, how are you today? I don't do that. I talk real. But when I'm done, I'm like, hey, bless you. I'll see you later. You're awesome. You're my favorite. I don't tell everybody that. You can't give in. If we're going to survive Babylon, we can't give in. We can't alter our language. We can't rebuild our foundations just because we don't like where we are. Because the fire is hotter than we thought it was going to be. We cannot just exist in Babylon. God never designed us to just survive Babylon. We're going to look at that next week. We have to learn from Babylon, or we will forever repeat Babylon. So you got that? If we don't learn from Babylon, then we will forever repeat Babylon, and we will take Babylon back home. So in other words, we got to make sure, do you realize that the nation of Israel went into exile because the number of years was because they didn't let the land rest? Do you realize when they went back, they never made that mistake again? They never made that mistake again. Maybe we need to realize that while we're in Babylon, we need to learn from Babylon so we don't repeat Babylon. Hello again, and thank you for tuning in. I pray that today's sermon has spoken to your heart and has ministered to you well. We just want you to know that we have two locations, one at our Sparta campus, our main campus at Sparta on the square in Sparta, and our second campus is at Smithfield behind Ace Hardware. And we would love for you to call Christpoint Church your church home. And if you're viewing this and you can't get in to church and you feel like you want to be a part of the church, then you can always be a part of the church. Just drop us a note and let us know that you enjoy being on board with us. And if you'd like to give and be a part of the ministry, then you can do that by just sending a check to one of the locations at 614 Murphy Street, Smithfield, 13 Liberty Square in Sparta, and we'll get you on the road. We just love you so much, and you can download the Christpoint Church of Tennessee app, and you can give online. So we are real people. We're living real lives, and we're serving a real God. And we just want to tell everyone, welcome home. We're so glad that you tuned in with us. Welcome home.